in terms of figuring out where to go, I never try to do everything at once. I pick one thing, I focus on testing it, I focus on analyzing the outcome, and then adjusting based on that one thing at a time, because I can do one thing well. I cannot do everything well. It's just not possible. And I also would say, like, before you go down the route of trying a new platform or a new place, ask your audience. I mean, even directly ask or just start to listen and see if that's something that they would even want.
From cave drawings to family histories to stories around the fire, humans crave order among chaos, connection amid isolation. So we tell stories. Our mission at the Storytellers Network is to bring the art of story to the masses. Whether you're in marketing, you're an entrepreneur, or you're developing your own personal brand, telling your story effectively can make the difference between celebrating milestones and collecting unemployment. The Storytellers Network strives to help storytellers tell their stories so you can learn from the best. Now, your host, the inbound evangelist himself, Dan Moyle.
Welcome to the Storytellers Network podcast. I'm glad you're listening today. This is another great episode. Man, I tell you, it's been almost 50 episodes, and I say it's every single dang time, but I just can't believe I get to do this and talk to amazing people. In this episode, we hear from a natural storyteller who is changing the world of marketing. And I'm just going to quote this off of what she says from her LinkedIn profile, because this says it best. To say I'm passionate about inbound would be an understatement. Whether it's creating inbound marketing content, enabling my inbound sales team, delighting customers, or merging account-based everything with the inbound methodology, I use HubSpot and I bleed orange. And that's Stephanie. Stephanie is the director of audience engagement and community at Impact. And she absolutely loves connecting with people and building relationships. And she's actually been using HubSpot for a number of years across a variety of industries on the client and agency side. And she uses story to connect with people and to help people. She is absolutely amazing. We have a great conversation. Outside of her regular job at Impact, she also loves photographing weddings, trying new restaurants, and taking her dog Penny to the park. And as I'm recording this, she's about to get married. So when you're listening to this, she just got married recently. So she and her wife are celebrating that right now, and it's absolutely amazing. And today, Stephanie shares with the Storytellers Network her storytelling craft, her successes, some of the challenges she faces, in other words, her story. And as we get into that conversation today, a friendly reminder to visit thestorytellersnetwork.com for more resources, for past episodes, for how to contact me, all kinds of stuff, just to help you better tell your story. And if you're new, don't forget, you can't forget because you're new, but if you're new, check this out. You can text Storytellers to 31996 to subscribe. So if you're listening on the web or whatever, you're listening somewhere else other than Apple Podcasts, where you can just click subscribe. You can actually text Storytellers to 31996 to subscribe. And now I'll shut up and get to the stories. So thanks for joining me tonight, Stephanie. I do appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah, the Storytellers Network listeners are going to get some good value out of tonight. You are, I tell you, we've been acquaintances, friends for a while, social media friends for a while. We've met in person. I've eaten your cupcakes, which are amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
Get out of marketing, get back into baking. But I've been watching your career, and I just, man, it's a privilege to watch it and to see what you're doing. So I'm glad to have you on tonight.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you to say.
Yeah. So you're a marketer, and you work a lot in social media, and you have for a long time. And right now, in fact, I consider a community manager, but it's actually director of audience engagement. But you kind of manage the community for Impact, right?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I do. We added the audience component very intentionally. Like, I helped create that title because I wanted it to be more than managing an audience database and more than tweeting. And So this is more than both, for sure.
Yeah. And do you find yourself kind of considering what you do as storyteller also?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't say, when I hear the word storytelling, I still think of like somebody at a library with like a bunch of kids on a carpet who's about to like tell a story. Yeah. And no one would hire me for that. But I think that you have to be able to tell a story to connect with people. Mm-hmm. And so much of my job is connecting with people.
Oh yeah. And you do great at it. And why do you think the story is such a part of connecting us?
That's interesting. I was thinking about that earlier, thinking about this podcast and just the concept of storytelling in general. And I think it's so interesting to me that I can tell a story the same way twice, 3 times, 10 times, even just once. And everyone who hears it's going to hear it differently based on, your internal context and your experiences. Like everyone experiences my story that I tell differently depending on their situation. And yet, even though it's different for every single one of us, we're having this experience that bonds us together. And so we're all like, if we're involved in the telling and listening of a story, we're all experiencing this journey together. And to me, like if I'm telling a story, I have a flair for the dramatics. I try to make it as dramatic as possible. And so I'm going to say something really slowly before I say something crazy so that I get people's attention. And we're all having that moment of release when the punchline comes and the laughter comes. And I think like just having that moment to bond over, it's something that can't really happen any other way. We're not really going to have the same bond when I share statistics as I do when I share a story.
Right. Now, so when you're describing that, Steph, I hear you say telling verbally, you're in front of people, you slow down for dramatic effect and speed up when you want to get excited. Can you have that same kind of experience when you're talking about, digital stuff like social media, like Twitter, Facebook, whatever, other than video? Can you do that through the written word, do you think, through social media?
Yeah, absolutely. We have very clear voice and tone guidelines for our content at Impact. And when we write an article, our editor, Ramona, is amazing at reminding me, like, you wouldn't say this way, so don't write it this way. But also put this on its own line, put it in italics, bold this word. I mean, that's why texting is probably the worst way to communicate, because you have like the least amount of stylistic options to convey all of those emotions. But you can absolutely tell a story through words and through a digital medium. You can tell it through pictures. You can tell a story a lot of ways.
What's your favorite way to tell a story?
It's conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of what makes me hopefully good at my job is I'll definitely talk through Twitter and I'll hop on a video, or even like at least now we're talking in real time face to face through Zoom, but nothing to me beats like a face-to-face conversation like this or in person.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorites too. And I love, for those storytellers out there listening, if you really like a certain platform, stretch yourself a little bit, right? I've talked to people who I love to write, but I don't like to present, or I love to speak, but I don't think about it as writing. How do you challenge yourself to become a better storyteller in different platforms?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, so I try to think about stories I like, and as a storyteller, I'm selfish. I want attention and I want people to listen to me. That's why I like telling stories in person. But the stories I like actually involve the least amount of pressure on me as a consumer of a story or a listener. I like Netflix. I like things where my response is not part of the situation. And so I think doing something like a webinar is really interesting to me because I have to convey the same amount of energy, but I don't get to hear the reaction on the opposite end. And I think that's probably hardest for me, harder than writing something, more challenging than working on a video that I'm going to post to social media, because I'll get to post it and then see the reactions later. The webinar, the best thing you're going to get is like maybe comments in the chat.
Yeah. And you say webinar, but you see that as the same thing with Facebook Live? I mean, is that kind of
I don't. For some reason, I don't. I think social media is inherently social. And so when I'm on Facebook Live, I just did a Facebook Live before this in Impact Elite in our Facebook group. And people immediately jumped on and started hitting the reaction buttons and answering poll questions, which you can do in a webinar. I think people are just more apt to comment on something in real time in a social platform than they are to just be like, haha, yeah, totally, on a webinar. I don't know if it's the professionalness of it or the lack of social, but also the reaction buttons on Facebook Live or any streaming Instagram give you that kind of reaction.
Yeah. And how do you, so you've mentioned quite a few different platforms and different tools we can use as storytellers. How do you sift through that? If I'm a new storyteller or I'm someone who's trying to expand, how do I even sift through that? Where do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, one of my one of my favorite phrases that I say all the time is best practices are test practices, because someone can come to you all the time and say that the new best practice is to do live Twitter video. Like, yeah, maybe it is for some people, but you have to test everything that you do. And it's not everything that works for everyone is going to work for you. For us, we're just getting into Instagram stories. We're going to test it. We're going to see how that resonates with our audience. Maybe they will follow us on Instagram. Maybe they won't. We'll see. A lot of people that follow Impact don't already follow us on Instagram because we haven't been using it in that way. But in terms of figuring out where to go, I never try to do everything at once. I pick one thing, I focus on testing it, I focus on analyzing the outcome, and then adjusting based on that one thing at a time, because I can do one thing well. I cannot do everything well. It's just not possible.
Mm.
And I also would say, like, before you go down the route of trying a new platform or a new place, ask your audience. I mean, even directly ask or just start to listen and see if that's something that they would even want. I used to work with like some law firms, and I wouldn't expect law firms to follow me on Twitter. In fact, I went to an event for law firm marketers once, and I wrote an article and I printed it out and I brought it to them on paper.
And did you end up having anyone follow you on Twitter after that? At least a few
No.
of them? No? Okay.
Not a one. I think maybe the like LMA, the Legal Marketing Association Twitter might have followed me.
Sure. It's funny. Man, I love the social media world that we're in. It can be so connecting. It can also be, there's bad sides to it. It can be isolating and stuff like that. But I love the world we're in. And I look at it as another tool to make you a better storyteller. Twitter can be done in very quippy, concise modes of communication. You can get very lengthy on Medium, and that feels social to me because you can clap for people and share things, right? How do you see social media impacting storytelling in general and marketing in particular? How has social media changed that scope, do you think, or that landscape?
I think we're getting to the best part of it, because there's something happening where people enjoy video. We know that. It's not a surprise, but as marketers, we're like, okay, right, we get it. People like video. We've got to do video. And the social media platforms recognize that, and the algorithms are pushing video toward the top of things that are being seen. And so with the algorithm and the thing that people want all pushing toward video, it's pushing marketers toward doing something that puts us in a place of vulnerability. You have to be a little bit vulnerable to come on video and put your face and your voice behind something. It's much harder to say something than it is to write it. And I think that's one of the biggest, I don't want to say dangers, but even just challenges of social media or even digital platforms in general, is it's easy to say something that you type, you hide behind the safety of your screen and forget that there's a human on the other end of it. And so we're at this point where we have this like amazing way to connect with people at scale in real time. And we're going to be doing it, or we're almost forced to do it, in specifically the most vulnerable, honest way.
Absolutely. It's huge to be able to connect with somebody, like you said earlier, Steph, face to face, and then video obviously does that. So when we talk about being a human, humanizing it, being authentic, being vulnerable, it all makes sense. Like, to me, I mean, I use those terms too, but for those storytellers out there who are, again, maybe just starting off or trying to do something new, what does that really mean for you to be human and authentic and vulnerable? Does it mean to have to cry on every video that you do to be vulnerable, or
No.
like what's a tactical way to do that?
Just because I cry out every video. No, I'm just kidding.
I do too. It's fine.
Yeah. I've been asked this question a couple of different times, not specifically in terms of storytelling, which is interesting to think about. But one thing I love is when I meet someone in person and they say, I'm so excited to finally meet you in person, but I feel like I already know you. Like, great, you should. If I'm being my true authentic self on video, on Facebook, on Twitter, in email, and then I meet you in person, it really shouldn't be any different. Like, maybe my voice sounds a little higher. I don't know. But other than that, like, you should already, we do know each other. Just because we haven't met in person doesn't mean we don't know each other. And so I think being human and being authentic on any platform means not changing what you say or the way you say it or what you do from what you would do in person. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't follow best practices for a specific network. I mean, when I go live on Facebook, I wait a few seconds. When I do a video, I always start with a smile because I know it's going to set a certain tone. But I'm still going to talk the way that I would talk, and I'm going to say gonna and coulda instead of going to and can. And I think that that rule should apply just as much to Twitter and email as it would to anything else, with the exception of like very professional writing outlets. I think to be human and authentic and yourself, especially on social media, is just not think too hard about it. Yeah. And be respectful. Let's all just be respectful.
Amen. And I like what you said, Steph, about it, when somebody meets you in person, they say, I feel like I know you. That's a great way to think of how to do that, just to be who you are and don't be afraid of that. So that's good. That's good advice.
Thanks.
I like that. So let's skip a little bit out of the social media side of things. Just talk about story in general. Do you have a story that has changed your life? Something that you were told or heard or that you told, a life-changing story?
Man, I love thinking about these questions because I could think about it all day and come up with like 5 different answers, and then might change tomorrow depending on my mood. I was talking to someone about this because I did look at a couple of the questions you asked beforehand just to, get my brain going. I was walking around and I thought about this one, and I'm like, every airport horror story I've ever heard, I think. I was like, the story that's changed my life, because they're so entertaining to me for some reason. I don't know why. Like, I've heard stories of people growing up in these crazy situations and then like building a business out of nothing and then going on to do these amazing things. I'm like, yeah, but this one time my dad was stuck in the airport. And it just like, I can recite his story word for word. It just stuck with me so much. I think those stick with me. But the stories, I guess the story maybe that has probably changed my life are the stories of someone being incredibly out of their way helpful. And I think that's just like, it's one of my core values as a person. It's one of Impact's core values, which is why I love being part of the Impact team and why we align so closely. When I hear a story of someone going out of their way to help someone, those stories always influence me in a positive way. So I don't know if it's like one story has changed my life, but like those kinds of stories are always changing me.
Yeah, those are good. Always be helpful.
That and if you give a mouse a cookie.
There you go. I love it. I think one that did it for me was the Dr. Seuss, When All the Places You'll Go.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one too. Like I go back to those kid stories, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're good for like The Giving Tree. They're all good. They're great stories.
How do you think the field that you chose to go into, marketing, is impacted by storytelling? So I guess what I'm getting around to is, have you always been a storyteller, and did that kind of shape your choice of career, or did it all just kind of happen by accident?
I definitely wouldn't say I've always been a storyteller. It's not like I grew up thinking that this is what I would do. I wouldn't say that. If you watch home video of me as a child, other people might say that I've always been a storyteller. Yeah. I think I didn't even so much choose marketing as it did choose me. I went to school to study music and left with a degree in public relations. So, as one does. But I think that the storytelling aspect has always been a part of my life, whether I knew it or not. Like, I love magic. And when I was little, I used to like to learn magic tricks. And I always loved the tricks that like told a story, that brought you through a journey, not the tricks that were just like, is this your card? Those are fun. But the ones that were like the 4 queens went to the court, like those are my favorite kind of tricks, things that tell a story. Now I know like all of 2 magic tricks right now, and they work best on a drunk audience. So I'm not going to do any magic, but I think that I've always liked telling stories, and I loved acting. I loved being in plays and musicals, telling stories that maybe weren't mine, I guess, retelling stories. But in terms of marketing, it's interesting because we're all trying so hard to tell our story all the time. Like, every marketer you meet is like, well, this is our mission, and these are our values, and here's our value proposition, and this is our audience, and this is our voice and tone. And like, we've all perfected this perfect storm of what our story is. And that's great. It's much better than probably just trying to sell people based on pure psychology and like vocabulary. But as a marketer, I do tell stories, and that's great. But I think I focus way more on helping than storytelling. And there's stories in our content for sure. There's definitely, not to say that there aren't, but I think just the relationship and the connecting aspect of what I do now is most important. And sometimes to get to that relationship building point, you're bonding with people, and you're bonding over stories of how you got there, stories of marketing tactics you've tried that worked or didn't work, speaking at a conference or an event, like I spoke at Inbound and Impact Live, like those, I'm telling stories at all of those. Sure. Facebook Live, the Impact show, when we do our Facebook show on Fridays. But I don't think of it as like, all right, I'm gonna wake up every day and tell stories.
Right. So when you tell us stories from the stage, I mean, you said it earlier, I think, do you like the attention? That's an immediate feedback thing though, right? Like, that's addictive, right? Is that why you want to be an actor too?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It's both addicting and terrifying. I mean, when you tell something and when you say something and people laugh, like there's no way that doesn't release endorphins in your brain. It makes perfect sense that most people would enjoy that. But I think the telling a story from the stage portion is interesting because I do it mostly out of wanting to help people. I have something that I've figured out that I want to share. I want to help people because I've been in their seat, quite literally. I've been sitting in those seats at conferences going, man, just tell me something, like teach me something, help me do this. Don't just talk at me and tell me what you've done. And so it's really from a place of wanting to help. But then, yeah, the attention's definitely a bonus.
So yeah, a nice mix there, right? So,
yeah.
So something I heard you say, Steph, was a minute ago about connecting, right? And don't just share, stuff with me. Don't just share statistics, but connect and then help me. And I was listening to Douglas Burdett, the Marketing Book Podcast, and he interviewed a guy named Mike Adams, who wrote the 7 7 stories every salesperson must tell. And what he said was something what you just said too. So I kind of want to go back to that and revisit that and reiterate it for listeners. Story connects us, and you don't have to only tell stories to teach someone, but when you're getting ready to teach them, you start with a story of, well, how did you get to where you are? Oh, that's interesting. And you listen to stories and then tell a story and be vulnerable. So you ask questions, you share, be vulnerable. So all the things that you said, like I heard that on Douglas's podcast too. And I just thought, man, that's a great thing to kind of remember.
That's so interesting too, because my fiance and I have this conversation a lot with the difference between like listening and active listening. I'm a very active listener. Like if someone's telling me something and I'm connecting with them and I hear something that resonates with me, I'm immediately like, oh yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. I remember I've been there, and it's not out of like a place of interrupting. It's out of a place of connecting. And my fiance has a very different style of listening. It's like absolute silence, focused on you. It's like the most intense form of listening. And it's so cool to talk to someone like that who's just focused only on you and listening and doesn't say a word, until you meet someone like me who wants like reaction and attention. And I just assume like you've tuned me out at that point. So it is interesting to connect with people in a conversation where you're telling a story and you're asking questions and you're saying, tell me more, because I feel like that's the thing that was missing, was asking question and giving somebody a chance to respond versus like either silent listening or me just interrupting.
Right. And you say fiance, but as we're recording this, that'll be a few weeks out. So you're actually going to be married.
I'll say my wife.
Right. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see the pictures because I follow you on Instagram and
yes.
Twitter and everything. So it's going to be beautiful. I know.
Thank you.
And there again, a wedding is a story.
Oh yeah.
Like we just can't get away from it. Right.
Oh, it's true. I mean, I'm writing my vows, and even that is all kinds of storytelling.
Well, I won't ask you to read them because in case you,
I'll cry.
It'll be after I get. I would too. So I want to go back to something else too that you said. You talked about going to school for music. I envision a season of Storytellers Network where I talk to entertainment storytellers.
Oh, yeah.
And I envision like songwriters.
Yeah.
I mean, music can be story, right?
Oh, yeah. And even without lyrics, I mean, instrumental music can absolutely be a story.
So what's kind of your favorite music then to tell stories or listen to stories, or like what's Steph's music heaven?
Oh man. Well, like my Spotify account has folders. So like that should tell you how diverse my taste in music is.
Fantastic.
I'd say my favorite kind of storytelling music is Broadway. I mean, that makes sense. Like it's literally musically telling a story. So that's obvious. I think the less obvious though is probably the more classical, more modern classical. Like I love Shostakovich. Shostakovich is my favorite composer. And the stories that his compositions tell are so interesting. And like, even if you don't know the story behind a piece, if you're listening to it, like you're going to feel the emotion that you can't miss it, which I think is so cool. And I also just love any classical, like instrumental only piano music. Jukebox the Ghost is a great band, and they did a piano only cover of all of the songs on one of their albums. They released like a piano only version, and it's one of my favorite things in the world to listen to.
Jukebox the Ghost?
Yes.
I'll have to check that out. And I want to put a link in the show notes for everybody to check it out too.
Yeah, do it.
Very cool. Yeah, I love music so much. And yeah, I hope to get some songwriters on. So if you know any, let me know.
I know a couple.
All right. Fantastic. So what do you do today in this noisy landscape to get stories out there? If I'm a storyteller wanting to, whether it's a book or, Medium or video, what are we supposed to do to get our stories out there today?
I mean, don't make it about you. I think that's the first thing. I make any story I'm going to tell is about the lesson or the person I'm helping, or it's not about me for starters. Even if it's like my autobiography, I still feel like I have something to share, something to teach. I was joking with people recently. I'm going to write an autobiography called My Slides Aren't Done Yet. Because like every event I've spoken at recently, like I know what I'm going to say, but my slides aren't done yet. But even that should be about like how I eventually found a way to get my slides done on time.
That's me right now, actually.
See,
I have a presentation next week, and I'm like, I probably should work on that this weekend.
I got to write this book. The problem is I don't have the answer yet. My slides still aren't done.
Yeah, always. It's always the last second, right?
Yeah.
Or I get the slides done because I know what I want to do visually, and then like the script isn't done.
Oh, we should trade then, because that never happens to me.
This time it's bad. This time it's the same way as you. This time I have everything written and kind of timed out, and I'm like, okay, do I memorize it? Do I just do notes? It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's all stories. That's the best part, is I finally have realized, I want to teach, but I want to give stories as examples and things too. So
and they're a good way to like remember what you're going to say too. I mean, if I have this very specific performance like cadence of a talk that I've come up with, and every slide has a punchline, I'm probably going to forget what I wanted to say. But if I'm telling a story, it's something I know well, and I'm going to share. I'm not going to forget what I'm going to say.
Yeah. So I like what you said earlier too about, I think about the path that we're on, and that, you didn't choose marketing, but marketing chose you. I feel the same way about myself some days. But the fact that you do all these really cool things at work, you get to do them for other companies before Impact. Now you do it for Impact for other companies, like all these things, Facebook Live and writing and presentations and marketing. But you didn't get here because you just went, I'm going to be a marketer. You got here through a journey, through a story. You said, music, you went to school for music. You mentioned you wanted to be an actor. You talked about liking magic. So to me, it's like all these things that help tell stories can get you into something, a job like marketing or maybe business development or whatever. Is there a part of your story that you'd love to share with somebody to inspire them to get into marketing? I mean, obviously you love it, but is there anything that you kind of found yourself over the last few years going, and somebody should know about this? This is totally off the cuff too, by the way. It wasn't in the question. So
no, it's great. You like strung my life together without realizing it, which is kind of creepy, but also kind of cool. It's funny because this is like such a cheesy answer, and you know it from years of being in this industry. But like the secret is, don't go into it to do marketing. Go into it to help people. And I keep saying that, but like, it's just so true. And I think back to, yes, I went to school to study music, and I loved acting, and I loved magic. And what you don't know is that right after I graduated with my super useful degree in public relations, I worked for an entertainment booking agency, and I booked like magicians and comedians at summer festivals and colleges. And I thought that was what I wanted to do. I was convinced that I wanted to help other people essentially tell their stories. Like I wanted to help these stand-up comedians go perform, and I wanted to help these magicians go do shows. And I was connecting with people to connect the right performer for their event. I love events because it brings people together. And what I realized in the process of that and how I actually got into marketing and HubSpot and all of this was I was working for this agency, and we were sending out these email blasts, like 50,000, 100,000 students across the United States who worked on campus activities boards. And it just said the same thing. There's just like a catalog of our performers who were available that month. And we just blasted it out. And I was like, there has to be a better way to do this, all infomercial style. Like, there's got to be a better way.
Yes.
But I kept thinking that. And this was around the time, it was shortly after HubSpot started, but like this whole inbound marketing thing wasn't much of a thing then. It didn't really have that word. And I think the first inbound event that ever happened, I wasn't at it because I was at this agency and didn't know it was a thing yet. And I was looking at our emails, and I was looking at the list of people we sent them to. And I was thinking about, like, I was a student. I booked these people at my college. What would I want? And I thought about how we'd go to all this work and try to find the perfect magician for family weekend, and like not enough people would show up. And as an agency with a ton of entertainers and have been doing this for years, we know how to get people to show up at shows. We know what to say about the person. We know what the posters should look like. And so it's like, why don't we just create like a guide for students to promoting these shows on their campuses? And I didn't even know what I was doing at the time. I was just trying to help people. And so then shortly after that, a friend of a friend connected me with somebody at Chicago Transportation Solutions, which is how you and I met. And he was like, okay, I want you to come here and create these tours for the city of Chicago. It was a charter bus company. And he was like, I want you to create these tours for the city of Chicago, and we're going to put them on our website. We have this thing called HubSpot, and we have a blog, and like, you can write a blog if you want. And with that, I was like, I'm going to do it. And I blogged every single day for a year, every single weekday for an entire year. I wrote like 200 and something blogs. And it was the perfect answer to what I was looking for, which is like, how can we help these people? It wasn't about telling them that we had a tour of the haunted nights of Chicago. It was about telling them how to get 50 people on and off a bus in an efficient fashion and not leave anybody behind at the end of the tour. And so this, like, I want to help people do their thing better, just became like, oh, I guess that's marketing.
That's awesome. And I think that's what marketing should be. Unfortunately,
it's the marketing that works. Let's be honest.
That's a right. I love it. So we could sit and have a beer all night long. But sometimes things have to come to an end, unfortunately. But I'm not going to let you off the hook too easily.
Oh gosh.
We're going to get to the last question. And I know you consider yourself a storyteller, but sort of not, because you want to be helpful, not just a storyteller. But if somebody said to you, all right, Steph, we're done telling stories, you got to do something else, what would be the last story you'd want to go out on? What would that look like? What would it be? How would that be for you?
Oh man, you really aren't going to let me off easy.
Mm-hmm.
The last story I can tell. That's really interesting. I got to go back and listen to every episode. Have you asked this on every episode?
I have.
I'm going to go back and listen to the end of all the episodes I haven't listened to. Just to hear.
Actually, you know what I'm thinking about doing? Like, truly, like, so I'm thinking about at the end of the year, when I've got basically no more guests and everybody's on Christmas break or whatever, and they just want to binge on stuff, putting together a highlight reel of that answer for every single.
Yes. That would make me want to go back and listen to the other ones. So you definitely do that.
I'm going to do that.
Because I've only listened to a couple, and now I'm hooked.
Oh man. That's
oh man. I don't want to say this, but like, I don't have a story good enough to tell to answer that question. I guess the story will be the story of my wedding that's about to happen, and I'll tell it next time.
There you go.
I think if I could only tell one more story, aside from like my most recent airport horror story experience, I would probably tell the story of how my mom managed to unite our entire neighborhood when I was little around a holiday that no one else celebrates, and bring kids together to perform and parents together to watch from all around our neighborhood, like 50 kids, 150 people in the audience, to celebrate the first full moon after the first day of fall.
Wow.
And really if you want to hear the rest of it, I guess you'll have to come ask me about it.
All right. I'll have to come to Chicago then real soon.
Because I feel like it's not the story that's changed my life, but it's definitely something that's guided me through my life.
And it sounds like maybe it's an inspiration. Your mom did this to be kind, to connect, do something cool. And like, that's what you do now as a career. I feel like, so.
Yeah. And it's a big surprise. My mom's in marketing too. So.
Oh, there you go. Awesome. Well, where's the best way for people to connect with Miss Stephanie?
Oh, this is going to be fun because I'm about to change my name. So
that's true.
The best place to find me is, if you can't find me, I'm probably not doing my job very well. But this will be the true test of it, actually, is like Twitter, Instagram. I'm at Steph K. Stevens, and Facebook is just my name, or Impact Elite is probably the best place to find me, is our Facebook group. So you can just go on Facebook and search Impact Elite. My email is skstevens@impactbnd.com. You can email me. And then after October 20th, or whenever I get around to changing all this stuff, this is the fun test, is my new name's no easier to spell than my old name. But I will be Steph Baiocchi, or S Baiocchi, which is B as in boy, AIOCCHI. And yes, I already bought the domain and claimed all of the social handles. So
well done.
You can find me by either name.
Well, I'll put links in the show notes, but I'll make sure before this goes live, we'll connect again. Make sure I have all the right ones.
Yes.
But for listeners, I'll make, you can go to the show notes at storytellersnetwork.com, and you can find all those links right to Steph and connect with her. And
that's a good place.
Ask questions and get help, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's all I want.
There you go. Well, thanks for being on the Storytellers Network, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Once again, thank you so much, Steph, for joining me tonight. That was absolutely amazing. And I hope that you as the listeners get a lot out of it. She is inspirational and helpful, as you heard. So be sure to visit Stephanie online. You can find all her links to social media and everything else in our show notes. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider sharing it yourself on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Email it, text it, whatever you want to do. Just tell somebody on the street. You can go to our merchandise link on storytellersnetwork.com, buy a shirt and wear that, and tell people. But you can share the episode anywhere. It's always helpful and very much appreciated. And if you're new and you want to subscribe, text Storytellers to 31996. Storytellers is like the keyword thing, right? To 31996. And hey, if you like it, what I'm doing here, please consider leaving me a review as well, wherever you're listening to the show. Until next time, here's to telling our stories and actually having stories to tell. Cheers.